Good afternoon and welcome to the Vision Alignment Show, where we all understand the importance of having our core beliefs, our core values, and strengths aligned with our vision. We've got a special edition coming up for you today and this afternoon because we usually do these shows early in the morning, but today we've got a special guest coming in from Los Angeles, California. He is a guy that I met about 3 years ago, and I'll tell you, I have so much respect for this gentleman. He is phenomenal when it comes to being relatable, being a person that can tell stories, being a person that can draw stories out from his audience and make them come alive, for a real reason. Without any further ado, I'm going to bring on our special guest today, none other than Mr. Mike Ganino.
Hi. What a fun intro. I like that.
Well, thank you so much for being on today. I appreciate this.
Of course. I always joke that I would show up to the opening of an envelope if someone invited me, because what a gift it is for somebody to build an audience and then be willing to share you with them. So I always have fun chatting with you.
Well, thank you. And we've got some people on today that are going to be watching. And if you're watching live, put an hashtag live. If you're listening to replay, put a hashtag replay. But Mike, I want to ask you, and everybody wants to know, when is your first recollection of knowing your vision?
My first recollection, I think it's one of those, I teach storytelling professionally, like how to tell stories on stage or video specifically. And I think for me, one of the things I believe is that our story is kind of always evolving. We're always, as long as we got the pen in our hand, which is the breath in our lungs, then the story is continuing to evolve. And I think mine was certainly that way as well. When I was little, I remember being really drawn to doing things that were entertaining. I loved putting on little shows. I loved creating an experience for people. And so the idea of storytelling was something I was doing as a kid. I mean, even I was that kid that when, you're like in third grade and you're reading the book out loud and everyone is like reading a line and people would read it, really monotone, just like they would, like Lucy went to get a frog. I was like full performance of like, how do I create a mood and an ambiance? How do I tell the story? So the idea of our words and our body as a mechanism for communicating emotion, that's something I've always felt strongly about. And so along the way, I've done that in lots of different capacities, as a performer, as an actor, as a leader in an organization, as a speaker on leadership, and then now with the public speaking and storytelling coaching work I do. So I think it probably started way back when I was little, realizing that if someone was having a bad day or someone had something they wanted to communicate or something needed to be expressed, that finding a way to use your body, your voice, your breath, your movement, and your words was often the most effective way to relay what you wanted to. And I don't know, I think that's been a long time for me. I just wasn't clear it would look like this, being on a show here with you today.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you want to hear more, hey, right there. Mike, thank you again for coming on today. I really appreciate it. tell us a little bit more about your story. Have you always been in Southern California? And I said Los Angeles. I hope that was okay.
You were actually correct because you said San Diego first and you corrected it to LA. And that actually is a perfect bookmark for me, bookends for me, because I did grow up in San Diego County and now I live in Los Angeles County. So like it was a perfect, you were channeling the inspiration of truth there.
Perfect. Perfect. So tell me, how do you go from where you were? I know you've had several different jobs up until this one. Tell us a little bit about that. How did that progress?
I think for me always, I mean, there are two things really that are key to this story. One is that for me, the idea of communicating was always clear in my job, whether I was in a leadership role in the hospitality industry, whether I was working as a flight attendant. That's what I did when I was in my early 20s for a year, moved to Chicago. That's how I initially got into acting and improv. And that whole scene in Chicago was my move there to be a flight attendant. And I think regardless of what job I had, there was always this through line of communicating that was really important to me. I went to college for broadcast journalism, so standing here and talking to a camera is something I learned back in the college days. And so that idea of communicating has always been really clear. I was always very clear that the way that we changed the world, whether the world was one little tiny sandwich shop that I was working in, or the world was an audience listening to you on stage or on screen like this, that your ability to change the world was going to be through telling a really great story. And so that was always really clear to me. The other thing that kind of dictated my path along the way is that I'm type 1 diabetic. I was diagnosed when I was 9. And so one of the things that in some ways stopped me from pursuing something when I was younger, stopped me from continuing to do a lot of the acting work I was doing. That was always like a side hustle for me, was that I had to have health insurance because insulin is a very expensive habit and not one that I could break because, I needed it to live. And so for me, being type 1 diabetic kept me in jobs that I needed. I needed these corporate jobs for so long. And I think what happened then is it really forced me to get really clear on how I thought storytelling, public speaking, presentation, how that worked while also doing the acting on the side. And so the world of writing sketch, writing shows, and performing them was always like just underneath of the work I was doing in the corporate world. And I think that by having to stay in the corporate world, it forced me to really look at what I was doing on the side and say, how does this work here? Because who knows, if I had gone the other way and I had lived in a country that had universal health care, then maybe I would be like a sketch actor still in Chicago, not making a lot of money, making fun shows with people. But what the diabetes forced me to do and the need for health insurance was to use the thing I loved, the acting, performance, communication skills, to do the job that I needed as an executive in the hospitality industry, as a sommelier at one point. And I think that's given me a really unique angle for the work I do today. So yeah, I think those two things are what really shaped my journey.
Wow. So how does that make you feel knowing that?
I think it's great. Part of it is storytelling, right? I'm looking back on my experience and looking at the things that happened that could just be random things that happened. And I'm looking back on it and I'm creating meaning from what happened to me. And that's really what storytelling is about, is looking at the plot points and looking at what happened to you and then saying, how do I turn that into meaning, which is then, where storytelling comes from. So for me, it makes me feel good because I figured out what the meaning was in this random list of things I've done.
Well, that's good. So, Mike, if you would play a little bit with me, tell me a little bit about what you go through. Yeah, you've talked a lot about what you do with storytelling, but we want to get specific, more specific. So, if we could have a little trial, trial, I don't know what you call it, but a little case study, if you will.
Sure. I think for me, the idea of storytelling is that there's certainly storytelling that is just entertaining. There's film and there's theater and those kinds of pop music that's written to sell records. There's those kinds of storytelling. Novel. What I work with people on is helping them tell true stories from their life. and doing that on stage in a way that's helpful to an audience. So how do you weave in stories to the corporate keynote around vision? Or how do you tell stories from your life that are then helpful to the audience instead of just being self-indulgent to share things about you? And I really do believe that every speaker, regardless of the message you're there to deliver, there's some element of your own story that makes you the right person to deliver that. And so that's what I help people do, is to discover what is that story, and then how do we weave that into the work they do or the work they want to do out in the world on stages and in breakout rooms and training sessions and those things.
Okay. So if I were to come to you and I tell you a little bit about my story of having brain surgery 11 years ago, lost my eyesight for 6 months. Now I have another brain bleed that's happened in my brainstem. It's caused me to have a numbness on the entire right side of my body. Everything is numb. My tongue is numb. What would you say to me, in terms of implementing that story or using that story or maybe different parts of my life in my message to people?
Well, I would start and say, what is the message that you want to get across? So let's start there. If you were thinking of what it is that you are here to say, and sometimes this takes a lot of work for people, but if you were to guess that right now and say, this is what I want to go say to people, what is that in like a tweet?
I want people to learn how to know how to influence, approach, and love others that are important to them. So you can go, that goes to leadership, leading people that are different from them, encourage people that are different from them, whatever the case may be. So in that, I also have in my speech, I have a letter that I wrote or actually I have a letter that my daughter wrote to me after I had brain surgery 11 years ago, where she told me who I was. She told me what I was to her. So the letter goes, and if you don't mind, I will read it to you because I have it written on my brain.
Love that.
Dear Dad, happy Dad's Day. I hope you have a great day because you definitely deserve it. All the cards and TV commercials always say, my dad's the best, but they're all lying. You're the best ever. Sure, other people's dads are great. I mean, they're younger than you, and they're sportier, and they're funner. But you've got something that other dads don't have. Bravery. Even after everything you've been through, you still get out of bed in the morning. You still joke around and play with us and cook on the grill. Even though you have half one good eye. But you do more still. You teach me. Even though you go through the most toughest, most grueling things, that if you just believe that God is right there with you through everything. Believe that everything turns out okay in the end. You'll make it out alive. Not always unscathed, but alive. And give me that hope, that sense of belief. Well, I take that over a dad with two good eyes any day. Love, 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 love. Just. So she wrote that when she was 13.
That's really great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So where would you place that in your speech, or where do you currently place that in your speech?
I currently have that towards the end, just because the process that I have for my company is to walk people from a point of blindness to vision. And the vision is really the action part. So I encourage people to, I ask them, when's the last time you wrote a letter, or when's the last time you received a letter like that? I say, I got a better question for you. When is the last time you wrote a letter like that? And then I encourage them to write that letter out themselves. I give them 3 minutes, and I have a little song that I play. That's called Drinking Water. It's I didn't sing it, but it's a song that I had made for me.
Great. And when you read the letter, do you do any how do you break down what that meant to you? How do you go into what it meant to you? Do you cover any of that, or do you kind of read it, let it sit for itself? Run me through what happens right before and right after. I see that you're doing, or I hear that you're doing that letter writing activity. Do you do anything where you talk about the letter and what it changed for you?
Well, so we talk. I talk a lot about encouragers because I want people to know how to encourage other people. In the initial stages, I talk about my story of having brain surgery. I talk about the encouragers of my life. I talk about the winking with Wagner, which you actually winked with me. I don't know if you remember this or not, but you winked with me, and others have as well. So that's the sight portion. So blindness is where you discover that you're blind. You discover that there's something missing, that you're not able to get to where you want to go. And the sight is where you begin to see things. You begin to see through your blind spots. And then vision is where you begin to understand what your purpose is,
Mm.
what value you bring, and how you should be delivering that value. So the encouragement aspect comes in there as well. So yeah, that's I could tell you a whole lot more, but I mean, I think that's what you're asking. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. So here's a couple of things. When you read the letter, what are you physically doing? How do you kind of position yourself?
Um, I will stand, and I'm looking for the letter here. I have a letter in every one of my coat pockets.
Okay.
I actually pull out the letter and I read it, although I don't have to read it because for one, don't see very well, but I mean, two, I have the letter memorized.
Sure.
But then I put the letter back in my coat pocket and tap. So
Got it. Got it. Yeah. So I think there's a couple of
um,
ideas that I
yeah.
think would be interesting. One is playing with a couple of ideas of what you do when you're doing that letter. So, like, maybe you're like unfolding it from your pocket. That could be because when we're performing a story, it's all about the choices we make as the communicator, as the storyteller. And so, there's something you could do where you have it folded really, folded into little bits. And there's like this process of you kind of unfolding it for us, which is like oh, what is this moment? Kind of in silence, where you're not actually saying anything to the audience, but you're kind of just thoughtfully kind of opening this thing, kind of taking a beat with it. That could add some interesting feel for the audience. You could, move where you are on stage with it. Those are kind of some ideas there. But what I think is really interesting, and what I would love to hear you try, as if you were in the moment. So you're reading the letter. What I'd love for you to do is come out of the letter, and instead of going right to kind of asking them what to do with it, I'd love for you to clarify for us how who were you before the letter and who did you become afterwards? If you were to do that. So you read this letter and then almost like you finish, I wonder what it would look like if you kind of stopped, held the letter at your side, kind of looked at the audience, took a couple breaths, and then shared about who you used to be and now who you are because you received that letter as if it was the moment. What would that look like?
Wow. Yeah. So
Try it.
uh, that's gold. Yeah. So I would finish the letter. I would put it in my pocket. I would put my hands to my side, and I'd look at the audience and I'd say, before that letter, all I knew was I just wanted to be alive. I didn't think about other people. I thought about myself. I mean, I was an IT salesman. I worked at IBM and companies like IBM. I mean, that's my life. That's what I did. I thought my job was to be the provider, be the guy that made the money, be the guy that brought home bacon, allowed us to be able to go on vacations. But I realized that that's not who I was. Who I was their dad. Who I was the guy that loved them. Who I was the guy that cared for them. The guy who I was the their the reason for life. And having said that, I'm willing to bet you that there's something that you provide that you don't see. So that's why the title of the speech is "If You Could See What I See."
Mm,
If you could see what I see now that I didn't see before, you'd be so much better off. How's
yeah.
that?
How did that feel?
That was awesome.
Good.
Awesome.
Good. I think
Oh,
so. Here's where that would go if someone's watching this and thinking, okay, how do I replicate something like that for myself? Where you go
yeah.
from there is you just play with it a little bit. You improvise multiple ways of doing it. You take my stage direction of having it folded up in your pocket, you pull it out, and you kind of are in awe at it a little bit of this letter, and you start reading it. Dad, say a line, you really look at them, let them think about what you're saying. And then at the end, maybe you play with multiple ways of kind of either you just hold it in your hand and you don't fold it back up, because maybe then when you're doing the like, I was their dad, I was their this, I was their, who I was their this. You said who I was. It's a great line. Who I was this, who I was this. You could have a moment with the audience that you didn't do that turn and you kind of look at the letter again and you're like, and who are you? And who are you? And you have the letter as like a tool. And then later you put it in once you ask them to start writing. That could be one way to try it. So play with that. Another way to try it could be where you fold it up afterwards, you put it in your pocket, and then you do that breakdown of like, I remember I was this and I was sitting here thinking this, I was the IBM guy, I was this and that. And I get this thing and now I'm this way. And almost like you realize the audience is there after you do the like, who I was this, who I was this. And you kind of look at them almost like in awe, and you say, what about you? And you go into that. That's another way you play with it. So where we go to when we're working on putting a story onto stage like this, putting a speech together, is finding lots of ways to work the material so we can figure out, ooh, that really felt right. That was the groove I liked. That was the thing I felt. Often speakers, storytellers don't want to rehearse because they don't want to seem canned. But the reality is the rehearsal allows you to get the grooves of that story really, really into. So when you're in that moment with them, you're living every line instead of having to remember what you're saying next. Does that make sense?
Right. Right. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, being in the moment, being in flow, and yeah, I agree. So I write my speeches out. Word for word, try to do that. And yeah, the speech I give is not always the speech that I have written, but it's very, very
Sure.
close.
Yeah.
So yeah, wow, wow, that's good stuff. I know you didn't sign up for this when you agreed to be on this call, but
I love it. This is the work I love to
frozen
do.
me.
So it's always an honor to get to see
Oh,
people look at their stories in a new way and find new ways of sharing what actually happened to them,
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much. And we can finish with that. I don't want to steal any more from you than what I already have. Um, but tell me, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
In general in life.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean,
be totally candid.
yeah, I think I've probably gotten lots of little advice that was super helpful along the way, but I don't know the best specific piece of advice I've ever gotten. I actually, these books that are like here are written by my friend Ari Weinswag, who runs a restaurant group, runs a whole
Mm,
organization, not just restaurants, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, called Zingerman's. And I'm actually listed in this book. He wrote about
mm,
a little policy we did at my company.
really?
And they have all these
Mm,
interesting ways they do things at Zingerman's. And they've got, it's just an amazing organization. And he's got these great, I mean, this is like a 500-page, 600-page book about the power of beliefs in business. He's got one on leadership, one on managing ourselves. And one of the things that I think I really, really learned from him along the way, he's been such a mentor for me for, I don't know, maybe almost 20 years now. Have a relationship with that organization. And I think one of the big things that I learned from him that really shaped the way that I showed up as a leader when I was leading organizations, the way I show up on stage as a public speaker, and now how I show up as a coach and director, producer of sorts for other public speakers and storytellers is really about like what he talks about in this book about managing ourselves, that learning to manage our own energies, our own headspace, what's going on for us is so critical because we carry all of that with us. You know, when you walk into the day and you haven't stopped to think of where you at. I posted the other day in my Instagram over at Mike Ganino, Instagram Mike Ganino, whatever, you know how to find it, about asking yourself, is this energy mine? Before you go on stage or on camera, but you could really do it before you walk out of the house or before you even get out of bed. We are little vessels. If you watch a rabbit, by the way, if you watch a rabbit, when a rabbit is getting chased by a coyote or something, it gets that same adrenaline, that same cortisol that we do, that stress hormone that says, get to safety, the flight or fight hormone that comes in. The rabbit then runs away. And once it's done, it kind of has like a little convulsion. It kind of like shakes. Once it gets away from the coyote, it does this shake because it's all of that trapped energy gets locked in the body. And so the rabbit releases it. We are the only species that I know of that stores that and doesn't get rid of it. We have a bad interaction. We slam on the brakes. We get cussed out by someone on the highway. We are upset about something that happened. We have a traumatic trigger of some situation. We don't often shake it off and get it out of our body. That energy is actual energy and it gets stored in our body. And if we don't manage ourselves, if we don't learn how to say what energy is mine before I walk on stage, before I turn on the camera, before I get on a sales call, before I meet with my team, if I don't ask myself what energy is mine today, how am I managing myself, then I am really not being an authentic, true vessel of what I'm here to do. And so that's probably the one thing I would say really, really changed the way I lead, the way I speak, the way I coach, from this book, A Lapsed Anarchist Guide to Managing Ourselves by Ari Weinzweig. Yeah.
Huh. Very cool.
Wow. I have one other piece of advice that I was given one time. When I was a sommelier, I was leading a trip through Europe of wine people. And I was like the guide, the host of this tour to a wine region. And one of the people there was from the Champagne region of France, where they make, of course, champagne in bubbles. And he said, we were talking about this, a whole group of sommeliers and we were talking about this in Spain. And the guy from Champagne said, open the good bottle. Don't store it. Don't wait forever. Once it's, sometimes you do need to store it because the wine needs to get better. But once it's ready, if you've got a nice bottle of wine, open the bottle. Don't wait to celebrate. And that's probably the second piece of advice I really try to live by as much as I can.
Oh, I love that. That's good. I mean, anytime that we have something good happen in our lives, we open a bottle of wine. So next time I see you, I will.
I'd love to clink glasses with you.
I can't wait, man. You're on. Well, this is great. So unfortunately, we're already at the end of our time, man. Oh my gosh, where's the time gone? You're phenomenal. I truly appreciate you being on with us today. Thank you. So, Mike, I have your URL here, but tell us what else would you leave us with?
Yeah, a few things. So you can go to mikeganino.com/storycraft. So Mike Ganino, GANINO.com/storycraft. There's a free 15-page storytelling guide. It guides you through the 5 stories I think we all need to be able to tell, especially entrepreneurs and leaders. Those 5 stories, how to tell them, how to put them together, a ton of story prompts to trigger your brain. So that is a freebie workbook. You can print it out, work on it with your team, work on it alone, whatever you want. I love Instagram, so find me over on Instagram, Mike Ganino. And then I have a podcast called The Mic Drop Moment, where some episodes are just me talking about storytelling, performance, creativity on stage, and some of it are with authors and leaders and things in the space. So I'd love for you to give that a listen if that is something that would be interesting to you.
Wow. Yeah. No, that sounds great. I appreciate that. It's so mic drop. Where can I find that mic drop podcast?
Mic drop everywhere, wherever it's everywhere. I've put it all over the world. So anywhere you're listening to a podcast, you can find it. Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, all of them have it. So it's out there, the mic drop moment. Just type that into your favorite tool and you'll see me there.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much. Mike, if you would hang out in the green room for me, I'll be there in a minute. We'll close out the show.
I'll be there. I'm going to get a glass of champagne to celebrate.
Oh, yeah. And there's green M&Ms, blue M&Ms, whatever you want.
You're too good to me.
All right. Thanks, man. See ya.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye. Woo! What a great show today. I'm like, oh my gosh. Mike Ganino, mic drop. I mean, how cool is that? Wow. We've got so many good things coming up. Next week, we have we don't have a show next week, but we do have a show the week after that. And we're going to have Clara Kumar come on. So we've got some amazing guests coming on here in the next few weeks, few months. And all kinds of good things are lined up. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I appreciate you. I appreciate all that you've ever done. But if there's ever anything that I can do for you or you want to hear from a certain guest, let me know. And I'll reach out to them. Just always remember to keep one eye on the road. Bye.